Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello, this is Returning Home, and you're listening to me live from my home in Susia in the southern Hebron Hills. This is Natalie Sapinski. Thank you all for joining us today. I was just thinking and, realizing that we're about to go into a severe lockdown here in Israel. And if you watch the news, you probably do see a lot of noise about that. But it doesn't feel so bad here. And in small places, you don't notice it, like where I live. And also, Israelis, they, they've gone through a lot. Several wars, 1948, War of Independence, 1956, 1973, 1982, the Intifadas in 1993, again, Second Intifada, 2001, more things over and over every few years. And Israelis are flexible and they can hunker down and change on a dime when they need to. And I love that because they are resilient and they keep moving forward, keep living their lives, even, or I guess in despite of, interruptions and danger and war and sickness. And we're living through it right now. And we're living through it and we're going about our lives. Today I was in Beersheba, police were everywhere. It was, very busy. People are feeling that they need to get out while they can. And that's the situation here. And I think we're going to be just fine. And I'm not too worried. And that's that. We have some great guests today, and we will be back shortly. We'll be speaking about jobs in Israel, because jobs in Israel are growing.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Returning Home. This is your host, Natalie Sapinski. Today we have with us a guest that many of you know, probably. Her name is Rachel Berger. She is the Director of Employment at Nefesh B'Nefesh. We're very excited to have her because there's a lot of opportunities here today and a lot of aliyah. So Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. I remember speaking to you years and years ago when we first made Aliyah, and I'm sure you've seen and met thousands, right? Thousands of people.
I would imagine so. Yeah, it's been a real privilege.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about how Nefesh B'Nefesh, how long it's been around, how it started, and then we'll get into what is going on today and how you can help potential Olim.
Okay. Nefesh B'Nefesh was started in 2002 by Tony Gilbert and Rabbi Josh Fass. And the purpose of it was to eliminate all of the barriers that make people think twice about Aliyah. whether they're issues of bureaucracy or employment or just knowledge of how things work here. They wanted to make it much more accessible to people to make Aliyah. And in that time, we have grown. We've brought over 60,000 Olim. We are a staff of approximately 100 people who work in different departments in order to help people come here, build their lives here, and succeed in Israel.
Okay, let me just jump in with a question. We have listeners from all over the world. Nefesh B'Nefesh, I think, caters to North Americans. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so if I'm from England or France, you're not the place to go.
You use the Jewish agency, but I do want to say that no matter where you're from, we have a very, very dynamic website with a ton of information that's worth using. We have a lot of social media that, again, is very useful to people, and because it's on the web, it's accessible to all.
Yeah. Nefesh B'Nefesh has become the go-to place if you want to make Aliyah from North America, and they even have, I think you have a newsletter and different email groups, I guess, a Facebook site. You guys do a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, about employment, there are a lot of people who are afraid to make Aliyah because they don't think they can make a living here, or they can't transfer their job. They don't know Hebrew. They don't know how to get certified to be, for instance, a nurse. What can you tell us about that in general? And then we'll go on to something, I guess, a little more specific.
So there happen to be a lot of opportunities in Israel. Sometimes people feel pretty overwhelmed because whenever you're immigrating, it's a challenge, and a person doesn't necessarily know how to navigate that challenge. But the truth of the matter is that there are literally hundreds of positions for English-speaking professionals. And these positions can be found in almost every industry. There's a huge need, especially in the tech sector, for English language professionals to do content, to do marketing, to do sales, to represent the companies, as well as you said about licensing and nursing here. We at Nefesh also have a department of licensing where we help all medical professionals navigate that route and help them with figuring out what they need to do and how to go about getting their license. So what we've tried to do is eliminate the barriers to information and access in order for people to find opportunities here. And our Olim, again, it's 60,000 Olim, have really found different areas where they've integrated, whether they're working at Amazon or Facebook, we have Olim working there, or whether they're working in a small startup, or whether they're working, as service providers in their area. People have figured out ways that work for them in order to make a living here in Israel.
If somebody, Rachel, if somebody wants to come here and open a business, can you provide guidance with that also?
So we do that as well, and we work with the Ministry of Absorption. They have programs that they fund in something called MATI, which offers a lot of coaching and a lot of information on what's necessary in terms of opening a business. And there are also Facebook groups like Living Financially Smarter Entrepreneurs, where any question a person has, whether it's technical, like setup, accounting information, or more idea-based, they have answers, or it's really crowdsourcing from other people that are running their own businesses, and it's a great network for people who want to start their own business. Very
good. That's very good to know. There are people who maybe don't have any professional background. So how about if they want to come here and they want to get training? Do you provide counseling in that area?
So first of all, we have somebody who counsels on both higher education and training opportunities, but everyone should know that the Ministry of Absorption offers up to 7,000 shekels towards retraining in anything technical. So it could be refrigerator repair. It could be I want to make shaitos. It could be I want to be a seamstress. It could be I want to be a technical writer. It could be I want to take a course in Python, meaning anything that's not university-based, they offer this voucher towards this course that can totally change people's experiences and upskill them so that they can integrate into the market in fields they're interested in.
That's fantastic. All right. Tell me what we were talking about when we spoke earlier about a new initiative that you've been involved with this past year.
So this past year, I've been involved in a high-tech initiative. Israel is short about 8,000 programmers, and this is true even during COVID. Anybody who goes on the website Startup Nation Central can get a report about the current situation in terms of staffing solutions and staffing needs of the Israeli economy.
Today, okay, slow down.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Rachel, when you say Startup Nation Central, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Startup Nation Central is an organization that promotes startups and helps the high-tech ecosystem in terms of giving grants and whatnot for staffing in their organization. So it's a great website if anybody wants to know, like, the kishkis, the inside information about what's going on in Israel in terms of the tech scene. And in terms of the initiative that I'm a part of, I really want to spread the word that anybody that has the background or is interested in getting involved in high tech in Israel, there are opportunities here, and they should be in touch with us at Nefesh B'Nefesh. We work with organizations like Made in JLM. I think I explained last time we spoke that Made in JLM is an organization that was created in order to create an ecosystem in Jerusalem of tech professionals. And anyone who goes on their website will see their job list of opportunities in Israel. And I think it's really important to stress that even during COVID, this is still the situation, that there is a need for high-tech professionals. And I was going to add that just today, on one of the industry papers that I read, Amazon is adding another 150 positions in Israel. So
Amazing.
It's important for people to know that this is an industry here that definitely has growth and possibilities. And as the listeners are listening, sometimes people say, but I'm not in tech. I'm talking about this as an addition. It doesn't mean that in the industry you're in that there aren't opportunities. There are many opportunities here, but people should know that this is an area of real growth and development here in Israel that is also being supported by the government of Israel.
Well, this is fantastic, and I want to throw something at you. And for our listeners, a lot of Jewish women are nurses, and they want to move to Israel, and they want to be a nurse here. Now, the high-tech industry, the startup industry, needs scientists, and some of these nurses could actually probably contribute to the ecosystem and be in the high-tech sector, right?
So if somebody would want to do that, so there are companies that periodically take nurses in order to work in the med tech or biotech framework, either as people who are going to be doing, because they have the scientific background, content or content marketing, or sometimes also to be the presentation person. We had a situation where they needed a nurse who had the delivery room experience because this company was creating a product for delivery rooms, and they needed a nurse with that kind of experience who was a fluent English speaker who could work bridging the gap between the company and the Hebrew-speaking professionals there to the hospitals in the United States. And that's the kind of thing that does exist, and that's the kind of thing that people can also access. Another important element for nurses to know is that there are a number of companies that have approached us for telenursing, for telehealth, who hire nurses to do nursing type of case management here in Israel, and they work for American companies here. And if people want to work, obviously, in hospitals and take the test,
I have to cut you off. Okay, thank you, Rachel. We've got to cut to commercial. Stick around. We're going to be back with Rachel Berger. Please stick around. This is fascinating, and all you listeners, please take note. Go to our website, and you can ask your questions there. We'll be right back after these messages.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things. But at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of Psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
Welcome back to Returning Home. I'm your host, Natalie Sapinski, and I just want to mention quickly before Rachel had to go, there are 429 jobs for scientists in Israel. Nefesh B'Nefesh is the place to contact for that. We're up now with a new woman I recently met, Janine Kutleroff, who lives here in Alon Shvut. She is a businesswoman, one like I have never met before in my life. She's amazing. Janine, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Not too shabby, huh? Okay.
Nice compliment. Nice compliment coming in.
That's right. So Janine, I like to focus the show on people who have moved to Israel and have changed their life, and I know you've done exactly that. So if you could, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background, starting from Ohio, and then we'll get into the professional stuff on the second segment. Okay.
Ask me any questions that you want. I grew up in Akron, Ohio. And when I was 17, I headed off to college in New York.
Okay. You're skipping a whole 17 years. You're skipping 17 years. Were you raised to move to Israel? You live in Israel today. You're American. So were you raised with Israel in your home?
No, we were not raised at all with Israel in our home. We had some traditional aspects growing up, but actually when we made Aliyah, there's like this common Aliyah joke about all these people who are raised so intensely as Zionists, and they're doing all the right things, and they're going to Israel Day Parade, and they're planting trees in Israel, and they're doing everything, and then the kids make Aliyah. They're like, well, how did that happen? And they're like, what did you think we would do? And their parents are like, well, we thought you'd send your kids to Jewish schools and march in the Israel Day parades. And my mother was like, well, we didn't even plant trees there. The word Israel never even came up in our home, so what I do wrong? So, no, we did not have Israel as part of our lives.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happened? I mean, you're here now.
Yes.
You've been here.
Well, I do have to give full credit, which wasn't always the word credit. I didn't always use to my husband, who, after we were married for a bunch of years and had 3 kids, said, okay, now to Israel, to which case I was like, Israel? And he's like, of course. I was always planning to live in Israel. And I was sort of taken back thinking, that seems like dating conversation, but sure, why not? Israel sounds interesting. Anywhere in the world would have sounded interesting. So I'm game for an adventure. That's really how I got to Israel.
Okay, so again, you're jumping. I mean, come on, Janine. When you're dating your husband, though, Israel never came out of his mouth.
No. He loved Israel, and I knew it. He spent 2 years here learning in a post-high school program, and he was, he wrote a whole essay on, people living in Israel, but it wasn't really obviously part of the plan. It was, it was okay. Like, again, it's an adventure. My life has been all about adventures and stepping into zones, always living in your discomfort zone, I should say. That's sort of a theme in my life. So I didn't necessarily think that was an obvious move, which he did, but I was very, very, optimistic about where it could take us. And definitely it proposed both amazing opportunity and tremendous challenge, as you can imagine, moving to another country for someone, especially who had never spent time in that other country, could be.
Okay, now I hope everyone listening is, seriously paying attention to these words, because this is the attitude that you need. And this is the attitude I have, and a lot of people don't. If you look at Israel as another New York or another Chicago or another Los Angeles, yeah, you're not going to come. But like Janine says, and like I've been saying from the beginning, if you look at it as an adventure, the picture changes. And like, who doesn't want an adventure? You only get one life. Yeah.
Definitely not everybody looks for adventure, but I think Israel offers a little bit of everything, right? I mean, there's a comfort. There's so many Anglos that do end up settling in different areas. You can find like-minded people, and I actually think that it's also a beautiful opportunity for those who look for stability and comfort to build communities. I didn't come out of a big city or a big Jewish background, but I look at my children here who have this ability to, leave the house, and you don't hear from them for lots of hours, and you know that they're safe, and you feel very comfortable that they live amongst their friends and everyone next door and the door after, and that you don't drop them off places. And so there's amazing things for every kind of person when you think of Aliyah.
Well, that is for sure true. The safety and the independence and the life for children. Israel is for children. I mean, everywhere 100%. You go, I mean, it's something I've never seen anything like it. The first time I ever heard young voices outside in the dark, I remember I was so taken aback. Like, why are there children out at night, talking alone? But kids here,
or when you're a working parent, or you have 2 working parents, and your kids are really, somewhat of a what do you call it, a latchkey kid or a key kid, and you know that they're okay. And you know that they're kind of getting home, and if they've run out of food, they'll run over to the Makolet and buy something and put on your number. I mean, these are things that they date back to when we were children, but it's certainly, I don't think, how anyone's operating in the States today.
You're right. Okay, so go on. So you meet your husband. He talks about Israel. You never had Israel in your background. You obviously fell in love with his Israeli lover, and, then what happened? I mean, you moved here. How'd you end up where you ended up?
First of all, it took a lot of years to become an Israel lover. My husband jokes that my family made Aliyah in 2002, and that I only made Aliyah like 15 years later, when I finally was like, you know what? I think I would stay in this country. So it definitely took me a lot of time to both adjust and love Israel the way I love it. Not that I didn't love it on the way, but there were moments, right? There's moments that happen that you appreciate where you live, and you realize how incredibly, blessed you are to even have that opportunity. And those moments are very defining. So in spurts throughout my career, I've had a great career, and I've had a lot of opportunities, and that's also helped make Israel, great for me. But because as an entrepreneur, the opportunities in Israel, like when I was in America and I was starting my career, I don't think I would have ever said, I'm going to start my own company. But the vibe in Israel, it really is like a Silicon Valley number 2, where starting your own business, everyone just has the audacity and the belief that that is an obvious path, whether you're just coming out of the Army or whether you have 20 years of experience or whether you know a lot or a little bit. So there's so much surrounding you that really does create, help you build yourself to be potentially a different kind of person than you would have been with different opportunities than if you were stateside.
Sure. It's like a little town here. So why don't you jump into that now? Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your professional and your educational background and how you've did it there and what you're doing here?
Sure. But before that, I'll just say one more thing to wrap up because I sort of touched upon it. The most defining moments that I think started making me love Israel were those things that I saw, the opportunities I saw for my children or the experiences that I saw my children have that I certainly never had growing up. The times where the things that they learn in their school or the things that they learn in, about Jewish life, and then you just walk outside and they say, okay, now we're going to do a trip to to the place where David and Goliath fought, and you go to that place, we just finished the book of, the book of Bereshit. Oh, let's go to the place where Avram and Sarah were buried, and have a party there. Like those things touch you in a way that really realize that you're living a very honest life. Or, for example, when I worked on Wall Street, some of my strongest recollections were Friday as the sun was setting, the stress of being like, I need to get out of here, I need to get home, and people feeling like, you're bailing out again, Janine. And here in Israel, every holiday and every Fridays are days off, right? Like the life is the Jewish life and the professional life have a very strong consistency. So that those things make you very much attached to the land in an amazing way. And of course, I have kids who've gone off to the Army, and that also it touches your soul very deeply when you feel so proud to be part of something bigger than you. So just wanted to close off the feeling, what helped me build, what made Israel so special to me.
Yeah, and I mean, you're saying these things, and there's so much more daily things, with when your children and family life is such a strong value. You're right. It puts everything in perspective, and in a different kind of perspective, I think. And you see that, you see it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so now the other side of my life is sort of my professional life, which, cut me off again whenever you see fit. But I started my career after college, and I studied mathematics, and after college I went to Wall Street, and I was an analyst there for a few years. And then the expectation on Wall Street, at least back then, was very much like you come here, you do a few years, and then we send you back to graduate school, to business school, and hope that you return and follow the career path of banking, which in those days was a very stable, very set career path, which I decided towards the end there that I did not want to be on. For some people it works really well. For me, there was something very deeply missing about the value of what I could do for the world. I felt there was something very strongly missing, so I kind of went out to seek where I could fit in. And I fell upon just a company who many people know now today, but then it was just a private company in New Jersey called IDT. They were a telecommunications company.
Hold down. And what year was that?
93, I want to say. Yeah,
okay,
probably
so
93.
All right. So we have a few seconds left, and then I will cut you off. So let's hold that so we don't cut you off too much. If all those of you are listening, we are speaking today with Janine Kudlarov and Ole. How long have you been here, Janine? How many years?
How many what?
How many years have you been in Israel?
2002, so going on 19 years.
Okay,
I just said 18 years, I should say.
2002, okay. So we'll be right back with Janine. She's going to tell us her professional story. It's fascinating. Stay with us, please. Janine, you'll take a break, and we'll be back after these messages.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Local Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on The Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Returning Home. I'm your host, Natalie Zapinski, and we are continuing our talk here with Janine Kutleroff from Alon Shvut. And Janine's going to tell us now, as we were just, talking about your career. Now, I think we just ended. You were in 2000. What were you in? 1993, and you had just finished business school or something like that. You were on Wall Street.
No, I didn't. I never went to business school. I just finished my time on Wall Street. And I just, by coincidence, somebody came to me and said, "Do you happen to be free? Our company, which is a telecom company, is looking to go public." And I think he was the COO then, and they said he's looking for somebody to come inside and just help do all the things that a company would need to do a public offering, to do an IPO. And I had time. I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do next. I did know I didn't want to go back to Wall Street, and so I said sure. At the same time, I wasn't even married yet. I think I got married around that time, and my husband wanted to make his way to graduate school, and so it seemed like a good 4 to 6 month stint. But very early on during that time, the CEO of IDT, Howard Jonas, he was a very big fan of taking people he saw as young talent and throwing them into sink or swim, and I got the opportunity to get to know him, and he had this amazing idea, which today sounds like, everyone's using Zoom. There's nothing about voice over IP that's interesting, but back in 93, there was no voice over IP, and that was, he had the idea. They were a telecommunications company, and they were an internet, or buying up internet companies all over the country. And part of the IPO kind of sexy appeal was going to be this new, what turned into be a VoIP company. And he just turned to me and said, "All right, Janine, why don't you stay on with us and run this thing, build it." And remember earlier in the show I told you I like adventure and I like living out of my comfort zone. So despite that I really had no business experience, I jumped on it, and I just was able to swim kind of under his umbrella and under IDT. I was able to build it from idea up to a successful company, which over the course of the next many years of IDT, there was many great things about Net2Phone, even that long preceded me. It eventually sold to AT&T for over $1 billion. It eventually was bought back by IDT, then spun off as a public entity. So it was an incredibly big success, of which I took a huge part in, starting and building for IDT. And I ended up actually staying with IDT for about 10 years, which transitions me into Israel. Should I take a break for a second or keep talking?
No, that's great. So some of you listening probably do know IDT. They have a big building in Har Hotzvim. And I remember back in maybe in the 90s, there were a lot of call centers, jobs for English speakers to work American hours. Does that sound familiar? And that was you. That was IDT. Am I right?
That was IDT Israel. So this time that I described was long before there was an IDT Israel. But yes, now fast forward to 2002, I finally left IDT, and I said, okay, I'm making Aliyah. Like, this is obviously, the dream of my husband, and I'm along for the ride, and bye-bye. And Howard looked at me and said, why would you possibly leave? This is absolutely perfect. It is, it was a terrible, if you obviously do remember, it was a pretty bad economic situation in Israel. People couldn't find jobs. I think Aliyah was less exciting, and a lot of people were even thinking of going back. And Howard said, I can't, go necessarily and fight in the army, but I can help the economy. Janine, go create as many jobs as you can. At which point we realized, like you said, that we had this call center in Puerto Rico and call centers around well, we didn't yet have call centers around the world, but that was a great way. Let's strip off some of those jobs. Let's kind of build this virtual hub in Jerusalem, and let's create jobs. Now, remember, IDT is now a publicly traded company, so you can't just do these things. You have to be very responsible to your shareholders, right? You have a fiscal responsibility. So there was a very delicate balance between a phone call I would get almost daily, how many jobs, how many people are you employing, and then the, of course, board members saying, make sure that we're doing the right thing for our shareholders. And
Okay.
it was an interesting balance.
I was going to jump in for a minute because we're talking about 2002. There was no Zoom. There was no WhatsApp. There was email, and there was the phone. So when you're working on 2 time zones, maybe more back then, right? And you're reporting to your board of directors, I'm guessing in New York. You're a mother. How old were your children at that age?
So I have 3 children. They were 5, 3, and 1 when we moved there. So over the course of IDT, which was the time in Israel, which was 4 years, and building a company of eventually about 900 people. I had 2 more kids, so they were from age 9 to 1 while I was running and very astutely put this 24/7, which was really a 24/6 in Jerusalem operation, but it was a 24/7 operation with eventually these 900 people in Israel, multi languages, multi kinds of services, from tech support to call center services to eventually high-end services like legal outsourcing, everywhere we could take expats and try to get them as close to their professional interests and give them jobs. And then I had these 5 young children, and I was sometimes coming to IDT from midnight to 4 in the morning, in addition to all day. I would try to show my face at all hours because it's a tough thing to do, to work shifts. I'm sure many people have done it, but different kind of hours in the countries you live in.
Are these call centers extinct? Or are they still going on? I hope it doesn't sound like a stupid question, but
I'm far from that world now. I mean, I've been out of that business for a long time. I think people still get calls and hang up on the people that call them. Those are coming from call centers, but I think that there's more automated. There's more automation that goes on, but I still think call centers. Actually, there are some in Israel still.
So what are these call centers doing? Are they doing marketing? Are they doing sales? Are they doing fundraising?
Anything. We had clients from Jewish organizations raising money and saying, hey, we're calling from Jerusalem, to people like we did support for Netgear and AOL, and no one ever knew that there was tech support was happening, in Jerusalem. That was like a no-no. Don't ever say it's in Jerusalem. So it really spanned a spectrum. And like I said, we even started legal outsourcing and financial outsourcing, where we were hiring lawyers out of Skadden Arps and McDermott and giving them, billing out associate level costs, but giving, partner level type of services. So it really had a huge range. And again, it was an amazing thing for its time. We bought a building. Anyone who's been to Israel, if you drive down the Begin in Jerusalem, there's a big IDT building there. So that was, that's a very small part of the IDT story. IDT is a huge, company now based in Newark, but it was a beautiful story for Israel at the time.
Right. That's very funny. It's funny to look back on it like it's history, when it was a big, busy, bustling thing. Not really so long ago.
No, not so long ago. And again, very, very. It served a real purpose for its time, Howard used to get on the radio or the newspapers and just say, "I'm going to be the largest private sector employer in Jerusalem," and that was his passion. And we really did it. It was really amazing.
That is amazing. 900 jobs is very nice. It's really amazing. I'm sure people moved to Israel, and that was probably maybe their first employer here. Could be.
For many. And by the way, it's tough, right? There are many very, very talented people who were doing jobs that was definitely below their skill set and below, where they should have been, but it was a way to stay here in a time that it wasn't easy. So again, it served its purpose at a very critical time, not always, glamorous, but you've been here long enough to know that Israelis are always willing to, roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty. But for Americans, sometimes it was a tough pill to swallow, right? Okay, I need a job. I need employment. This is a really, not the kind of prestigious job I'm looking for. But nonetheless, you got to put food on the table, and if you want to stay here.
Okay, so let's move on, because we're down to 4 minutes left, and I want to go on to what you've done since.
Okay, so I talked a lot about, so after I actually left IDT after it was a very, operational center, right? We had centers all over the world. We were dealing with all sorts of clients and all sorts of technical issues, and it was more of an operation. And I'm a real sales and marketing person. And my husband, who actually we met in graduate school, in undergrad. He's also a mathematician by trade, and then he had gotten his PhD. He's in the field of computer vision, which is basically the field of how does, artificial intelligence is what people are familiar with today, and computer vision is the probably largest aspect of that, whereas how does a computer understand the world it sees through the eyes of a camera? And he came to me and he said, okay, Janine, you've now run 2 companies successfully for a parent company. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is and let's go do something on our own? And of course, now we're living in Israel. And Israel, like I said earlier in the show, it's like Silicon Valley too, where just the ability to start a company is at your fingertips, even though that sounds very daunting. It's not, you have so many people around you who have done it and you just kind of jump in. So that's what we did. I left and we started a company which was computer vision oriented in the early days of when artificial intelligence was even becoming a field that people were starting companies around. And we built a company, having never really done it before, certainly never done it before in Israel on our own. And we ran it for about 6.5 years. We employed about 50 people. We had a small branch in San Francisco, but most of the people were employed here in Israel, actually in Beit Shemesh. And eventually we did deals all over the world. I traveled to more places than I'd ever dreamed of, a lot of places in the Far East, China and Japan and Taiwan.
What's the company called? What was it called?
It was called OMEK, O-M-E-K. Actually, in Hebrew, it means depth, and we were actually working on depth cameras, but we were a software company that took software from these depth cameras to try to understand people. So it was kind of like control everything without touching it, right? A touchless interface. And we eventually sold it to Intel in 2013, and that was a really amazing, successful, but not with tremendous difficulty along the way, but it's an amazing run and a really great outcome.
Amazing. Okay, so we're just about out of time. Is there a company that you're involved with now that you could just shout out real quick about?
Yeah, I started another company with my husband after we both left Intel, but in today's, it was called Clearviews. It was a drone company doing autonomous cinematography, right? Like teaching drones how to see the world and take pictures for people, but very much focused in the tourism space. And obviously right now with what everyone's facing and dealing with, it's very much stealth. But that was a 3-year.
Thank you. Okay, so let me just say goodbye. We're out of time. That is okay. You got it all in. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Janine. That was great. Everyone listening, please tune in next week.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.